Squarespace recently introduced a brand new editor called the Fluid Engine Editor. This new editor is meant to give us a lot more flexibility in our designs and a lot more flexibility in how we place blocks within the sections on our page. Of course, with this comes a slew of questions like, what can you expect when you use this brand new editor? Is it the time to switch to the new editor? And what's going to happen to your existing pages and existing sections on your website? Those are the questions that I will be answering in today's video. If you're new to this channel, my name is Anna Lea. I'm a designer, overall tech geek, and owner of Lea Design Studio, where I help small business owners create websites and content that converts. So with that out of the way, let's dive into today's video. So first, let's start by answering what is the Fluid Editor. So as I mentioned before, the Fluid Editor is the new editor that the Squarespace is going to be using moving forward. It is different from the classic editor in the sense that while yes, you are still using blocks and you're still placing those blocks within the sections on a page, what's different is the way that you place those blocks. You have a lot more freedom, you can move them around, you can place them basically wherever you want, and you have a lot more freedom and flexibility in placing those blocks. Along with that, the new Fluid Engine Editor places a lot more importance on the mobile design. In other words, when you design your website for desktop devices and then when you switch to mobile view, in the classic editor that we have used so far, everything adjusted automatically and you really didn't have to do a lot of tweaking to the mobile layout of your website. Well, with the Fluid Engine, you will have to, in some cases, you will find that you will have to adjust the layout separately in order to get it to look exactly the way you want. It's important to note that this Fluid Engine Editor also uses the grid system like the classic editor, but within that grid, you can adjust the number of rows that you have, the gap between the columns, and overall just place elements in a way that is more, a lot more, I will say, intuitive and more flexible in the way where those blocks can go. For example, the image blocks no longer have those layouts that we used to use, like the poster, stack, collage, card. Those layouts are gone. The reason behind this, I believe, is because you can easily recreate those layouts yourself. So you can easily place an image block and then right next to it place a text block and then overlap so that it creates a collage layout, place it side by side so that it creates a nice split section, or even just overlay a part of the text and then add another text block that is not overlapping the image so that you can get that overlap look that we used to have with the overlap block. Those images can also be set to fit or fill, and the difference between those two elements is that between those two views is basically that if you select fit, then it will fit, it will maintain the aspect ratio of the block. If you set it to fill, then it will fill the entirety of the container that it's in. So technically you could take an image and you could stretch it out so that it fills the entirety of the section. And the same applies to the button blocks, which also now have the options to be set to either fit or fill. So those are kind of the big changes that you can expect when you start working with the Fluid Engine Editor. So what is not changing? So certain things are still the same and they still behave in the same way that we are used to with the classic editor. For example, collection pages like blogs, shops, event pages, gallery pages, those will still use the classic editor. You can add new sections to it that will use the new Fluid Engine Editor, but the collection page itself will use, when you add a section with that particular collection, it will still use the classic editor. On top of that, previous list layouts and gallery layouts will still function the way they did in the classic editor, so you will still manage and edit content for that as you did with the classic editor. Squarespace is still responsive, so that hasn't changed. So in essence, when you switch from desktop to mobile, you will see that elements will resize to fit the new mobile layout or mobile screens, but you will find that sometimes you need to make small tweaks to get the layout looking perfectly and exactly the way you want. Now, of course, when you adjust the layout on mobile devices, that will affect only the mobile view. It will not affect the desktop view. So how can you tell if you're using the classic editor or the Fluid Engine Editor? So essentially, If you click on a section within your website and you see the button that says upgrade, that is an indicator that you're using the classic editor. Another way that you can tell if you're using the classic editor or the Fluid Engine editor is in the way you add blocks. So if you create a new section and then you have that I'm going to say default text block within your section that has the plus sign at the top and at the bottom to add new blocks, that is an indicator that you're using the classic editor. But if you add a new section to your page and you see a button in the top left corner of your section that says add a block, that is an indicator that you're using the Fluid Engine editor. Another thing that I want to mention is that spacer blocks are also gone in the Fluid Engine editor. And again, since you have so much freedom in how you can place the elements on the page and within the section itself, there really is no need to have a separate spacer blocks that you would normally use to create columns, layouts, or to shift blocks around on your page. So now you know what the difference between the Classic and the Fluid Engine editor is. You also know how to tell if you're using the Classic editor or the Fluid Engine editor. So should you switch to this new Fluid Engine editor if you're not already using it? So first of all, every website that is created after July 21st of this year is by default using the Fluid Engine editor. If you have created your website before that, then you will need to switch eventually. However, you do not need to switch immediately because Squarespace themselves has said that they don't plan on doing away with the Classic editor in the near future. They will keep it around, so if you're accustomed more to using the Classic editor, you can still continue using it. However, your website, when you go to create a new page and new sections, you might have you will see the option to create, basically to start using the new Fluid Engine editor. And if you don't want to do that, the way you can access the Classic editor is by, when you go to add a page or a section, if you scroll all the way down past all the options, you will see the option to use a pre-made layout using the Classic editor, or add a page using the Classic editor, add a blank page or a blank section using the Classic editor. Now, if you're wondering how to switch to the new editor for all your pages that are existing and were made with the Classic editor, they will not automatically switch. So they will still use the Classic editor. And if you want to keep them, you can also duplicate those sections and duplicate those pages. That's yet another way to keep using the Classic editor instead of using the Fluid Engine editor. But if you want to switch, then all you really have to do is click that upgrade button, and then you will that section will automatically convert to the Fluid Engine editor. Be careful with this, because if you're not ready for it and you're just curious to see what happens, that change, once you save your page, once you save your edits, is not reversible. So if you do not want to use the Fluid Engine editor, I wouldn't click that button. I would create a separate page on your website, or even start a new trial website with Squarespace, and then play around with the Fluid Engine editor, see what it can do, add a few blocks, experiment with the options, try to create a layout, recreate the layout that you have on your page on other pages, and adjust it for mobile, and basically see what all the options are. Decide for yourself if you like it and if you want to use it, and then and only then go ahead and upgrade your website. However, do note that this will take some time. It's not going to be a flawless process to where you will click the upgrade and then nothing will need to be changed. You probably will need to make tweaks and adjustments to your layout, especially for mobile devices. So keep that in mind. Should you switch? In my opinion, hold off on it for right now. That's because the new Fluid Engine editor still has some kinks to work out, and still some things aren't working quite the way you'd expect them to. So for right now, I would hold off on upgrading, give it a few more months until Squarespace irons out those kinks, and then go ahead and upgrade your website. Also, one more thing that I forgot to mention is that the Fluid Engine editor is only applicable to 7.1 websites. So if you're using Squarespace 7.0, you don't have to worry about it unless you go to upgrade your website to 7.1, in which case you will use the Fluid Engine editor right from the get-go. But if you're using 7.0 and you have no intentions of upgrading to 7.1 in the near future, you're good. You don't have to worry about it. You're still using the Classic editor. And that's it when it comes to the major differences between the classic editor and the Fluid Engine editor and what you need to know right now. That said, in the future, I will be releasing more videos about the Fluid Engine editor and Squarespace, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, if you're ready to start working on your website and you need a little help, I highly recommend you check out my free training on how to build a website with Squarespace in 5 easy steps. I'll leave a link for that in the description down below. That's it for today's video, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!